Hello, welcome to Valley Talks. My name is Sylwia Gorajek and today I'm joined by Tim Schwab, Chief Revenue Officer at KnKt'd. Tim was a CEO and co-founder at Sales Beach, a prospect engagement platform. Luckily for Sales Beach, they went through 500 Startups program, but unfortunately for Tim, he got fired from his own company. This will be a story of how Tim went from poverty, criminal records, drug addiction, to a savvy entrepreneur that raised millions of dollars in Silicon Valley. Tim, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Absolutely.
I feel like we need to tell your story from the beginning.
Sure.
Because this will give us a picture of, what was happening later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were raised in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I was born in Georgia, moved to Wisconsin shortly after. Family moved around a lot. My dad, really smart guy, he used to sell a computer in California in the 80s called Coco, which competed with the Apple II. And that company did not do as well as the Apple II. But so it was always kind of a thing that was going on as technology. And so my parents got divorced around 4. My father got into an accident, and a car accident. He was rear-ended, it wasn't his fault. And from that he became disabled. He could still walk, and he could talk very well, and all those kinds of things, but he was in a lot of pain and had to have 3 or 4 back surgeries over the years. Parents got divorced, my sister and mom left. I was with my dad kind of alone in Wisconsin, and as I grew up, I realized that school in Wisconsin was not a really good fit for me. No. Once teenage years hit, I kind of realized I got what I needed to get what I wanted, or at least I thought I did. And so the internet was just becoming a thing, right?
Okay.
I'm 14, and so I kind of dove into that. I started playing professional video games professionally. So I started playing a game called Quake, and I ended up practicing with one of the world's biggest professional gamers now. His name's Fatality, and that's his job, is to be a professional gamer. He's a world champion. He's won millions of dollars through what he did. And so I practiced with him, and I was, from not going to school and playing this video game, when I was 14, they flew me to Scotland to compete. All the while, my father was kind of slowly deteriorating in health. I went to this tournament. I got 5th place in the one-on-one competition. I was like the youngest guy there. I was around all of these internet gaming people who were a lot older than me, and I'm like this 14-year-old blonde kid from America, and everyone's like, what are you doing here? Who are you? And so that was kind of the first time when I did something on purpose that was big, that was something that no one in Wisconsin understood. The internet was still new. I kind of didn't tell anybody about it because it was embarrassing. I'd have to explain, like, oh, I play this video game on the internet, and people would be like, what?
Were you earning from that?
Yeah, I mean, they paid for my trip. We won some money in the tournament. It wasn't, a lot of money. It was mostly just the travel expenses they took care of. But, the people I played with ended up to go win a lot of money, millions.
You were also involved in drug addiction.
That came next.
And some criminal record. That was next?
Yes. Yeah, so when I came back from that trip, nothing was really interesting anymore. Like, that was incredible, and I wanted to continue doing it. But, my father being in the position he was prescribed a lot of painkillers. And so as a kid who, was just learning about marijuana and dabbling here and there, because remember, a lot of the people I played video games with online lived all across the world. And so I was talking to a lot of people who were older than me, more experienced. And so I'm 14, and I start taking some of my dad's medication without him knowing. Slowly, I develop an addiction to Oxycontin, which is basically synthetic heroin. And meanwhile, there's really no supervision. My dad's mostly sleeping all day at this point. And then what finally kind of crossed me over into really getting heavy into that lifestyle, that criminal lifestyle, was when 2 things happened. My father had a schizophrenic episode. So he was, while I was playing video games, he was, coming into the room and saying that there were people outside, and he had like a baseball bat, and he thought they were taking photos of him, and just really wacky stuff that when you're 14 and that's your only parental figure, you're like, I know you're not right, but you're still my father. And he was such a good guy. The problem was that he was always really good to me, but because of his illness, it ended up looking and feeling like neglect and being kind of abandoned by both of my parents. My mother being gone since I was 4 and my father. And so I developed an addiction. He had, it wasn't a complete full-blown addiction when he had that episode. I was just kind of dabbling. Then he had the episode. I remember waking up the next morning and there was a police officer at my bed. And he said, "Hey, you got somewhere you can go?" I said, "What?" I'm just waking up, what? And I sit up in bed and he said, "Yeah, we got to take your father in for a little bit. He's acting a little strange and talking to the neighbors." And I'm like, I guess I can call my grandparents, but they lived like an hour, 2 hours away driving. And they're like, "Okay, good." And then they just like, "See you later," and took off.
So they left you there?
Yeah. So I was 14. It wasn't too weird.
How about your mom? Did you have any relationship with her?
She was an alcoholic for most of my life. And as is typical with addiction, the alcohol wasn't the problem, it made the problem worse. And so she also a very good person, very compassionate. When she was not drinking, she was a great mother, but she also had 2 other kids from 2 other relationships. And so I have a half brother and a half sister through my mom, but I'm an only sibling through my dad. Once he got back from the hospital, he was doing okay, but he was still prescribed these painkillers, and he never abused them. He took them as needed, and his health deteriorated to the point where I was picking up his prescriptions, doing all the laundry, cooking, all of these things between 14 and 15. And so it was basically my house. So it quickly became the place where my friends would come over and we would all, do drugs. In the beginning, we were playing video games and doing other stuff, but then very quickly it started turning into, okay, this is where we just hang out and do drugs together. One day, some of my associates that were living at my house decided it would be a good idea to rob a veterinarian clinic and get ketamine in particular. Now, what had happened at the same time is that after 12 years or so of my father being on OxyContin, the doctors and the people caring for them started getting pressure from the government or wherever else saying, like, we got to stop giving people OxyContin because people are abusing it. And so they actually took him off of it and sent him to rehab and saying he was an addict when he wasn't. And so suddenly that was gone. The thing I was addicted to is gone. And no one really has it. I don't know where to get it. And my friends say, well, we're going to rob this veterinarian clinic. And so I said, okay, I care about my dad a lot. And I care about getting high. And I guarantee that there's morphine and other opiate drugs there. So I'm like, all right, I'll drive. I'm not going in, but I'll drive. So I took him there. I was sitting in the car. We were, they had ski masks, the whole thing. And their plan was to just throw a rock through the window, climb in, grab the safe full of stuff, and bring it home, and then we'd break open the safe. And,
Did it happen? Did you make it?
Absolutely, yeah. We went. It was nighttime. It was dark, around 2 in the morning. I parked the car a couple blocks away from this veterinarian clinic. It's in Wisconsin, so it's a small town, big spaces between buildings and big fields. And so there's a big field where, we could kind of approach the back, and there was nothing. And so I got out of the car and kind of watched them go in. There's 3 of them all in black and ski masks. And they, I saw them, throw a rock through the window. There's no alarm. They come out and they're like, before we got in, we were so like excited and just, and it was really just the adrenaline of it all that was exciting. I wasn't really even thinking about what we were getting. But, I knew that my dad was in a lot of pain and he couldn't get any painkillers, and he'd be comfortable with, needles and stuff because he was diabetic as well and was used to doing insulin. And I'm like, I know, that not only will I get high from this, but he, I can help my dad. It was honestly a thought in my mind. I know in retrospect it might sound.
But you got caught.
We did.
For this.
Yeah, so after we had brought it back home, we had got my dad's titanium drill bit, drilled open this safe. So there's all these vials of different drugs, morphine, hydromorphone, Dilaudid, a lot of the same stuff that Michael Jackson and Prince overdosed from. So I was playing with some really, really hard stuff. Well, one day, I'm laying in bed, not going to school. I'm about 16, 17.
You were not going to school for years.
Yeah,
this
no,
point, right?
not really. I was really just doing this. And I'm alone. I'm in bed again, the same time, kind of the same way that I was woken up when my father had the illness, only this time it's my friend who was asleep on the couch. Now, I had just done some morphine a few hours earlier. My girlfriend was just over. I was sleeping after her visiting, and she had gone back to school because she was, a good student, and I was not. And so all I remember is my friend coming in. We called him Frodo. He looked like Frodo Baggins from Lord of the Rings, Elijah Wood. He looks a lot like him. So Frodo comes in, and he shakes me. He's like, Tim, there's cops all around inside the house. You got to get up. And the weirdest thing is that I was totally okay with it. Because I was like, of course they are. I've been doing this for so long.
But were you scared of what's going to happen?
No, that's the weirdest thing.
Because of the drugs or because of
Not at all.
your attitude?
There was this feeling of just like, this is happening. And there's nothing I can do about it. And then I have nowhere to go.
Maybe also you wanted some change and you knew that this is going to cause the change, right?
Exactly. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I very much didn't like what I was doing. I didn't know how to get out. But the drugs I was doing made me feel good. And so it's just this constant cycle. So I opened the door, and there's some type of assault. I'm not a gun guy, but it looked like an assault rifle in my face, full riot gear type thing in my face. Just get on the floor. And I'm like, all right, fine. Put my hands behind my back. The next thing I know, I'm getting handcuffed, and I'm on the ground. And this detective that had come by my house about a month before told me he'd come by my house about a month before and said, hey, one of your friends snitched on you. They told the police. They told us, we got you on wire. So you have two choices. We'll either arrest you, or you can, snitch on some of your buddies. You can go undercover and do that. And I said, no, I'll call you. And so, I never called him, and so maybe part of me knew this was coming, but at the time I wasn't thinking it was going to happen. And then, the next thing I know, I'm spending 6 months in jail, and then another 6 months in a halfway house. About, a month before this happened, before, the robbery, I had found out that I got a girlfriend of mine pregnant. And so I also had a kid coming, and I knew that, I wasn't going to go to college. I wasn't going to be, at this point in my life, I'm not going to be able to get a good job. And I needed to get my shit together. So I think, being arrested was the best thing for me.
What happened after you left the jail?
Well, my son was born. They put me in a transitional living home. So it's called a halfway house. And so there were about 10 guys living there that had just gotten out of jail. And so it's kind of like getting them used to being out in the real world again, kind of a rehabilitative thing.
So how did you transition from this whole jail experience to running your own company in Wisconsin?
Right. So,
which I know that then you kind of sold or got acquired by a company here in the Valley. So let's talk about this
Sure. So it took about 6 years to get to the Valley from there. But as I got out of jail, my son was born, and seeing my son Jaden born and holding him just changed my life. And I knew, this isn't just about me feeling good anymore. This isn't just about me scratching my own itches. This isn't just about me getting what I need as a consumer of the world and whatever. It's about making sure that I can take care of this other human now, and I have to. And so I started in a call center taking cell phone insurance claims. So these are people that, this is before smartphones. So people would drop their phone, and it would break, and then they would go, oh, I have this cell phone insurance through my carrier, so I'll file a claim. And so I was taking 80 calls a day of people like, hey, I dropped my phone, can you send me a replacement?
And what happened to your girlfriend in the meantime too? Were you
We got married. Oh. Right, so I really took, I took responsibility for everything, and honestly, this wasn't, I had love for this girl, I cared about her as a person, but she wasn't somebody I was in love with prior to having a baby. I had learned to love her, and tried to make it work for a while.
And you had another child.
That's right. So her and I, 2 years later, after things had stabilized and I had done well with at Travel Guard, eventually I was their top salesperson in a different department. And so, you know, we had decided to have another baby.
Okay. So what was your startup doing in Wisconsin?
So,
and tell me a little bit about the situation, how the company from Silicon Valley got to know about you and acquired you so that you arrived here.
Absolutely. So I saw an opportunity for a travel insurance aggregator website because I'm like, we're selling travel insurance, but what if there was like a kayak for like travel insurance, right? And you could, you could put in your trip dates and then we would compare all of the travel insurance policies so you could find the best one. And the way that works is then we as the middleman on that would get a very nice commission because travel insurance pays about 30% commission to people who are selling it. And so some of these trips average, $700,000. So per policy, it's just pure money. And the only challenge was partnering with other insurance companies other than Travel Guard. And so I had put all the wireframes together. One of the guys that I worked with on another team who was an engineer, I got him excited about it. I told him about it. And we had started it and we named it Trip Cake. Which the tagline was peace of mind is a piece of cake.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good
So
one.
we thought we were super clever. And before we even got it off the ground, through my work at Travel Guard, I was identifying, startups that maybe would be a good fit to, integrate either our travel insurance or our worldwide services that we offer. So Travel Guard was also a 24/7 emergency services operator. Later, Life 360 baked that into their premium product.
Yeah, so how did you pitch your startup to Life 360 or were they your client? How did that happen?
by this time...
In Wisconsin and Silicon Valley, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so I had been divorced from the girl I just talked about for about 2 years. And I was bored. And so working on this idea was really cool, but then I had a hard time with the engineer. He kind of didn't need any money. He made plenty of money. He told me, he was like, I want for nothing. This is just kind of a fun project. Well, I'm like, I'm trying to build something big. I want to, I don't want to just make a lot of money from this, but I want to build a big thing, right? That people know and remember and all of these things. And so before we even got anything launched, right, we just had like a prototype that we didn't even go live yet. I started talking to Life 360 as part of my work for a potential partnership. It was way too early, but I ended up, I saw an article on TechCrunch that Life 360 had raised $10 million and that they were a family locator app where you could see where your family is on a map. But what I saw right away is that the app's free and there were no advertisements. And they were raising money off of users. So I had been watching the Valley and learning a little bit about this, and I was like, they're going to need to make money at some point. And so I sent Chris an email. I found his email online. Chris Hulls is the CEO of Life 360. And I found his email, and I said, hey, how about we find a way for you to make some money off of these users by utilizing some of our emergency services? You could include it in a premium product.
So he decided to acquire you. Did he pay you for that? What was the deal?
Yeah, so it was a good deal. And so my engineer at the startup is gone. I just kind of have it. It's just sitting there. I don't really want to grab another engineer. I don't really want to work on it anymore because I'm like, I'm just selling travel insurance. It's the same thing. The only difference is now I own the business. And so when I called Chris one day after we had been talking for weeks about the potential partnership, and I said, hey, do you know anyone out there who needs sales help? And he said, oh, well, yeah, I know a lot of people out here. I mean, would you want to move? I thought you were doing pretty good there. I'm like, yeah, I am doing good, but I'm bored. And he's like, yeah, but don't you make pretty good money for Wisconsin? I'm like, well, yeah, but I mean, okay. I don't see myself retiring here in Wisconsin and living the kind of suburban middle class life that everyone seems to aspire to. There's nothing wrong with that. I tried it for a long time. I just couldn't do it. And so Chris said, well, I can probably get you, some leads. I'd be happy to, introduce you to some people. I know people at Oracle and Salesforce, and they make really good money. But, we're looking for a business development person, which sounds like you'd be a little better at working on the product and maybe more of a business development angle, because it sounds like you're kind of bored with sales. I said, I'm really bored with sales. And he said, well, can you come out here? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what would it take? I'm like, well, I got this startup. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, what is it? Mm-hmm. And I told him what it was, and we talked about it. He liked the idea. He asked me a lot of questions. You know how when you talk to another entrepreneur, you kind of get grilled. Mm-hmm. That's what we do with each other. And so he said, well, tell you what, I'll just buy that company from you.
So for how much did he buy it?
It was a good amount.
Good for you.
It was good for me.
Okay. So you moved here.
Yes.
And started working for Life 360.
Yes, as their vice president of business development.
Mm-hmm. You moved to San Francisco?
Yeah, I had just met a girl. There's a lot of girls. I'm sorry, but there's.
Well, that's life.
For some of us.
But you also, did you move with your kids?
Yeah, that's right. So I had met a girl 2 months earlier, and she was great. She was a little young, but she really liked the idea of moving, and she loved California, and she was really good with my kids. And she was, and so I kind of floated the idea by her, and she said she'd love to go.
How about your girlfriend and your kids? I mean, your wife.
That's the girl I met. Oh, I had been divorced.
Yes, but didn't she want to keep the kids?
I was a single dad the whole time. She had moved to New Jersey with her and made a new family. So she has 2 other children now with a really good guy, and they're doing well.
You moved here, started working for Life 360. By the way, is this when you moved to Tiburon?
Yes.
When you had no idea where you are because it was like pure night.
Yeah, exactly.
You had no clue. This is such a stunning place, right? And this is not the cheapest place, by the way.
No, well, it's cheaper than in the city of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. But Tiburon, I didn't know anything about it. When I came up here to meet with Chris. I flew out here to just kind of see what it was like, because he said, look, if you're going to move your kids up here, you got to learn this place. Mm-hmm. And Chris was always, as the CEO of a family-focused company, he was always real focused on what I was doing as a father, as a provider. And so he said, look, if you want to come out here, you probably don't want to live in the city. And I'm like, well, where do you think I should go? And he's like, just live in Tiburon. And I said, Tiburon? What's that? He's like, oh, it's just really good family. You'll fit in good there. You'll fit in really well. And I said,
where all the billionaires and stars and this. He didn't say.
He didn't tell me any of that. And so what happened was Chris, brought me on the ferry at the Embarcadero, from the city to Tiburon, and it was like one of the last ferries. So it was night, and so I went home and I just looked for places to rent in Tiburon, and I found a place for about $2,800. That was a 2-bedroom townhome. Which was comparable to what I'd see in the city. Certainly, this was 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it was a little high, but I had 2 kids, and we were it was a huge downsize for us because we lived in Wisconsin. I had a nice home with land and stuff like that, which out here doesn't exist. But so I moved there, wake up the next morning, and we look outside the balcony, and there's just mansions everywhere. And quickly I realized I'm the poorest guy in this place. Like like everyone around me clearly has more money, and I did no research on the place, but as I'm living there and I'm talking to people, they're like, oh yeah, Carlos Santana lives up there, and Mark Benioff from Salesforce is down in Belvedere, and I'm like,
where am I?
And my girlfriend, who's younger than me and came from Wisconsin as well, she's like, I feel like I'm in a movie, and I'm like, I don't know how we got here.
During your work at Life 360, you came up with an idea for a new product.
Mm-hmm. So after leaving Life 360, I started doing sales contracting in the area, and I met a couple of guys at a company called Safe Shepherd. They were a neat little company started by 2 guys that I really liked, named Rob and Jeff, who came from UPenn and just were really smart, hardworking guys. And they had somehow found a way to be profitable for this identity product that I didn't completely understand, but it was interesting because they had been through 500 startups, but they had paid back all their investors. So they were completely profitable. I'd never seen that here, right? And so I was like, that's really not my style, but they're doing something that's cool and that I'm going to have to learn when I do my own company. I'm going to have to learn to manage profit at some point. We can't all raise money forever. And so, you know, I start working with them to try to sell their products to businesses. And in order to do that, I came up with a product we later called Sales Beach to automate the prospecting of business-to-business selling. So what the product did is it would set up a drip campaign, but with personalized emails that looked personal. And the idea was, if I'm trying to reach a VP of business development at any other company, or if I'm anyone that I'm any buyer, customer that I'm trying to reach in a business-to-business fashion, the drip campaign would automatically reach out to them until they responded in a way that was spaced out from my experience in sales, where I would know you're not going to piss anyone off if you kind of set the cadence like this. And so with all of my experience there, you know, I developed some wireframes and mock-ups for how this product would look, you know, who the customers would be, and I shared it with them, and they were like, yes, like let's just whip it together here. Like our product's kind of in maintenance mode. And so then they helped me put together a prototype.
Would it be already obvious that this is going to be your own company?
No, I didn't know what we were going to do with it. I'm just helping them because I really like them.
So how did it happen that you became a CEO of this new company?
Yeah, so it was actually Robert, the CEO at Safe Shepherd. As we got this product together and used it, it worked so well. Like I got responses from vice presidents at Oracle, from Disney, from Pixar, from Netflix, from companies that I would never think that if I picked up the phone and cold called, or if I just tried to email and do it myself, it would have taken so much time. And so I told them, I said, look, this is awesome. Like, we should just do this together. And Robert said, you know, Robert and Jeff, you know, talked about it for a while, and then Robert came back, took me out for coffee and said, look, why don't you take this and run with it? You would be an awesome CEO. And that was the first time anyone ever said that to me.
So he impressed you with this offer.
Yes.
But also he offered you something that is not super Silicon Valley style, I would say, because he decided to invest in this company $50,000.
That's right.
And he claimed to have 60%.
That's right. Basically, Robert said, look, we'll give you 50 grand, but I'm going to keep 60% of the business. And I was like, why?
And he wouldn't work at this company.
No, he was, but
Exactly.
Just based on the work they had already done. Now, at the time, coming from Wisconsin, I'm used to getting screwed on everything, right? I mean, I worked for a guy that owned 100% of Travel Guard and sold it for $200 million. And my point is that I was just excited to run something, and I couldn't believe someone actually wanted me to thought I could be a CEO. And I started getting excited, but I also went back and talked to some of the friends I mentioned that I met who were involved in the early days at Salesforce, and they said, don't take that deal. Don't take that deal. You can raise money on this product. But I didn't know anything about that. And so there was an offer, you know, and I took it. And I had a lot of arguments with him about it. We got really heated, and I remember asking him, Rob's about my age, right? And he always landed in a good place, but this one he just wouldn't budge. He was a tough negotiator in general, which is fine. A lot of people just like negotiating. Not my thing, but it's fine. I'll do it when I have to, and I'll make sure I get a good deal. But at this point, I'm like, I have an offer on the table. I still think, you know, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, because without that experience, I wouldn't be here.
It's just about being warned early enough not to really get into this, because you can make it happen differently and still have the amazing experience and still have.
That's right.
Still, you know, run a startup in Silicon Valley, but having a different deal, which actually, in your case, led to what happened.
That's right.
That you were fired from this company. So let's talk about what was happening in between within this time. So Robert actually was also the person that convinced you to participate in 500 startups.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing was, is when we interviewed with 500 startups, we met. I met with Dave. I impressed Dave, and you know, when they accepted us, I met with Parker Thompson before I took the deal, because I met Parker briefly and I knew he was really smart. So Parker was a venture partner at 500 Startups. Now he's a venture partner at AngelList. And still, I met with him just yesterday, he's still one of the smartest guys I know, and he said to me, he said, I don't think you need these guys. He's like, I think, you know, you could, he said this without saying it, that I could reapply to 500 startups with the wireframes, take the name off that we had come up with, and that I'd be able to get in. But so I wasn't reading between the lines.
They liked you, they liked the product. They obviously were concerned about the deal.
Yes, they were very concerned about the deal.
Which is still weird that they accepted you with this deal, because that also involves them, you know, as investors.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about that, and Robert pushed just as hard against them as he did with me, and I just said, let's just do this. Let's just do this, we'll fix the cap table later. We're going to raise more money anyway, we'll fix it then.
That doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't, but I thought it would.
Like many of us. Why do you think that Dave still agreed to approve you to the program?
Business was doing so well. I had major clients using the project. We had Berkshire Hathaway, we had you know, some of my friends from AIG were using it, you know, and the traction was good. We had about $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in monthly recurring revenue, and we hadn't lost a single customer. And from everything I could see, there was really nothing in the way.
They liked you even that much when you ran out of cash?
I ran out, yeah, so I had hired, after getting into the program, I hired out a team. I loved these people, like they were just some of the best fun people to work with that I ever met. And it was the first time I was a CEO, so it was really exciting. And at the time, Dave and I were relatively close, and you know, where I sat in the accelerator was pretty close to him, and so we got a little more one-on-one time than a lot of some of the other startups. And as we were running out of money, I'm texting Dave, like I still have text messages on my phone saved from Dave and I where I'm like, Dave, I'm running out of money, but the business is looking good. We just added 3 more customers and revenue's still going up, but I can't make payroll. And he's like, okay, how much you need? 40,000. It's like, okay, here's the deal. Wasn't great terms, but it wasn't as bad as the 60% chunk I already don't have. So I'm just going to, you know, try to keep the wheels on the bus.
What was happening inside the company right after 500 startups, when, you know, all the joy and excitement maybe went a little, you know, down, with your CTO actually, whom you hired from AngelList?
That's right.
Well, we know that, you know, it didn't work out. What was the worst part of it?
The worst part of it was as we were running out of money, and I was trying to raise more money. At this time, you know, you have to remember I was a single dad. My wife that I had moved, who became the girl I moved to California with, you know, she had left 2 months earlier. So not only was the company running out of money, but we were still bringing on more customers. The product was still good, the traction was still there. We were running out of money, so I'm trying to raise money from our current investors and do a bridge round, which no one ever wants to do. You don't even say the bridge word, right? You just don't say that. You try to come up with another word for it because investors know it's bad. So the worst part is as this is happening, I'm a single dad, I'm taking care of 2 kids at night, I'm on the phone all day with investors, with customers, with my team. I'm not sleeping, I'm under a lot of stress. And
what was not going well in the company?
Well, within the company, there wasn't anything yet other than the money running out. But Andrew, the CTO, who I really like and is a really good guy and did really good work for us, he started getting really scared and nervous that we were running out of money. And I tried to encourage him and be like, no, this is fine. We're going to get out of this. You know, the business looks good. Like, I may not understand fundraising as well as people here, but I understand how business works and the numbers look good. Like, there's not going to be a problem. And so he continued, you know, to get scared. I continued to take on more stress. As a result of that, I stopped sleeping. I start getting a little more aggressive with Andrew and upset that he's kind of reacting in a way where he's kind of hiding and kind of like a turtle going into a shell. And I felt terrible that I couldn't pull him out of it. And there was just nothing I could do. And he stopped talking to me. Just stopped talking to me. I didn't know what was going on. The next thing I know, the board is getting in touch with me and they're saying that, that Andrew is really concerned about you. They think, he doesn't want to work with you anymore.
And Andrew was your co-founder
That's
too,
right.
He also had shares.
Yeah, he had the same amount I had. Yeah, which was not 60%.
Yeah.
And then they start talking about potentially firing me. I find out from some of my advisors that I brought in, including some of my friends I met on the ferry who worked at Salesforce. And one of my advisors in particular told them, said, look, Tim is the lifeblood of your company. All of the customers you have are from him. If he goes away, your company goes away. And I'm sure the rest of the investors would agree with that. Andrew continued to push against it and said, I won't work there if Tim works there. That advisor said, look, Tim just needs a break. I've seen this before, okay? Stress does weird things to entrepreneurs. Just needs a break. So, I took a break. I went to Austin to see some friends of mine. I'm a musician, so we went and, played some music. And then I came back, and I'm getting served termination papers from the lawyer that I brought into the company at Oric. And so, yeah.
You were in the mental clinic at that time when you got this termination.
That's right. That's right. So what had happened is, I was found out at that time that I had a mental illness and that I'm, bipolar, and that I started experiencing a manic episode. Now, it was more of a hypomanic episode, which means it wasn't psychotic, but it was, I'm not sleeping, I'm sleeping 2 hours a night, I'm working all day, I'm not eating, I'm working out all the time, I'm getting a lot done. So for a few months, I'm feeling pretty awesome about that. But the problem is that the way mental illness works is as you get closer and you keep ramping up, it's like a black hole, and you start getting sucked in faster.
When did it start?
About exactly 2 years ago. So about June, July.
Yeah, so it was within the Sales Beach
yes.
Situation and running the company.
That's right.
That probably happened because of all the stress and all the pressure that was happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's something that is not that uncommon in Silicon Valley.
I know, but no one talks about it. And this is the thing that really bothers me because, I'm someone with a criminal record, a mental illness, no college education really, and I'm here talking about that I have a mental illness and that I have all these things. And there's guys from, Ivy League schools that have a similar problem, that have a lot of shame, and they just, there's kind of this stigma about it. But if you remember what my advisor said, who, or like I said, came from Salesforce in the early days, said, I've seen this before. This happens all the time. You just need a break. Get that taken care of. Go to the hospital, do what you need to do. It's fine.
And actually, that moment when you went to the hospital, you agreed to do it on your own.
Absolutely.
Because first they forced you, but you were acting as if everything was okay.
Right.
But then you decided to do it in order to save the company.
That's
so
right.
that your co-founder, Andrew, would,
That's right.
You would just finally say, okay, it's finally happening, he's getting the treatment and it's going to be all right.
Exactly.
And that's also when you came back, you
That's
got
right.
those emails
The
about
termination letters from Joseph at
so
Oric.
cruel.
Yeah. Right. And so that was really upsetting, but it was also mostly hurtful. I'd never missed a payroll with this company. I had paid those employees rather than paying myself, and I drained my savings to pay my own bills.
They could do it because they voted this.
There were 4 people on the board.
Yeah.
Robert and Jeff and Andrew and myself.
And they did it without meeting you.
Correct.
So what did you do next?
Well, I got, after, getting out of the hospital, my kids, moved, or my boys, Jane and Gavin, moved with their mom and her new husband in Salem, Oregon. I was getting evicted from my place in Tiburon. And so I called that same advisor from Salesforce and I said, what do I do? What do I do? I feel like I'm ruined here. Like I had this big opportunity I felt like I had the potential to build $1 billion company. In my head, I saw how it could work hundreds of different ways. And now that's gone. And I didn't do anything wrong, right? Like all I did was take a bad deal, work my ass off, raise more money than Safe Shepherd ever did on their own product. And I didn't ask to have a mental illness. I didn't hurt anybody while I did have that. And yet I felt a lot of shame because I couldn't, because of that. And yeah, so I didn't know what to do. So I called my friend who's very much more experienced in this and has seen this before, as we talked about. And he said, look, it's like, part of your plan's got to be coming back here, right? And I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, yeah, you want to get your kids back in Tiburon, right? Like, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, look, you just need a longer break than I thought. That's all it's going to be. It's just going to be a longer break. Get a 12-month plan, work backwards, get a 6-month plan. You got 2 to 3 startups left in you. But first, go up to Oregon, be with your kids, take some time off, and then come back at it, a year or 2 from now.
That's what you're doing right now.
Exactly.
You live in Portland.
Yes.
Why do you say that you are the least favorite Portland startup founder?
Well, I'm on the favorites list, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm the least favorite because while I'm rebellious and mercurial, like Portland seems to pretend to like, I'm not pretentious like Portland can be. I'm not a hipster, and I speak my mind and I talk about things like this, and that makes people uncomfortable. So I've found that people like me, but they don't, I'm not the face of Portland, that's for sure. Not the face they want.
You're now working at a company called KnKt'd.
Yes.
That's really close to your interests. And do you have a plan to start another business?
I will.
When you get rest, right? Enough rest and come back here to the Valley? Yeah,
I'm really passionate about the startup I'm working with now with KnKt'd. They're a behavioral health company that I think has a lot of potential to do a lot of social good, not only make providers, psychiatrists more money, but also improve the quality of life for their patients and make their treatment more effective. And to really just bring up the efficacy of what they do. Now, just like my friend and advisor told me, this isn't the last you'll see of me, and that you'll see after this, you'll see another company from Tim Schwab.
Would you, if you had a choice, would you totally skip that time with Sales Beach, or would you still keep it in your
I'd still have it, because now that won't happen again. I already got that over with.
Yeah.
Right?
So you don't regret this happening?
No, not at all. Some of it, honestly, as awful as it was the best thing to happen to me. And I've got nothing but love for everyone involved for it, even though I disagree with some of their decision making. I think at the end of the day, everyone's good people, but some bad choices were made.
Tim, it was a great pleasure to have you here on the show. It's a great story, very inspirational.
Well, thank you.
Say that, you've been through so much, but you're not done.
No.
And you're only getting stronger with every period of your life.
That's right. So are we all.
And I wish you all the best with your next endeavors.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.